day two.
Is your name George? Yes, thank you.
It's lining up around that direction, then you got one going that direction, then you got another one. Hey guys, it's me again. And if you don't know me, I'm Rick from Black Rose Spirited. Well, tonight, just wanted to have a little chat, a very short one, about the paranormal and your senses. Now, the last few years, because it's just been better for myself doing Black Rose Spirited mostly, my focus has been using the cameras and the equipment, all the paranormal gear, and it doesn't really, because my focus is there all the time, I'm not really using as much of my senses as what I used to. Now, as soon as I turn the camera off, I start going back to how I was and using my senses and communicating with spirit and doing all sorts of weird and wonderful things that I'd been doing for years without the paranormal gear. Now, when I started doing the paranormal stuff back in the early 70s to mid 70s, basically all I really had was a camera, and all the way through up until probably the 1980s into the 80s, all I ever took with me was a camera, and I was doing the house cleansings, I was doing the cemetery explorations and all sorts of different places as well. Now, back in the day, if I remember correctly, the first camera was a little Instamatic thing which had Fuji film, so that was all I carried with me. And I do remember that back in the early days too, I used to knock off my dad's old box Brownie camera and experiment with that too. So you can imagine what that was like, going out into cemeteries at night time and trying to get shots with that and a torch. Mind you, did get a lot of really excellent orb shots out of all of that sort of stuff, but back in those days. Back in the 80s, I think I jumped to the digital cameras, and I was carrying around the digital camera, and that was all I had. And in fact, up until probably about 5 years ago, that's all I had, just a digital camera. My part of the investigation was always the mediumship side, and that's using your senses and feeling what's around you and trying to work out things from the feelings and your intuitions, and trusting your senses around you. And when you develop all of that sort of stuff, you can also develop starting to communicate with spirit directly themselves, which is something that I do and Beth does. In fact, for about maybe about 9 years, I think I was hooked up with a very well-known Australian paranormal group, who I won't mention here. But my role was actually the mediumship side, so I was using my senses. I never used any of their gear. I was interested in all the gear and all that sort of stuff, but I never actually used it. I used my senses and directly communicated with spirit. So over the last 5 years, my focus has been more behind the camera, using the tech gear and all that sort of stuff, whereas Beth is not so much interested in tech gear itself. She prefers to use her senses. Now, when the camera's off, I start using my senses and that, but while I'm using the gear, my focus tends to be on the gear, and it tends to block the senses a little bit. And yeah, it's a lot of fun using all the gear and that, but it's also important when you're out there to trust your feelings, trust your intuitions. Because the more and more that you trust your feelings and your intuitions, what actually happens is your aura changes, and spirit can pick up on the change of the aura, and the change in the aura is it puts a little bit of a light into your aura, I guess, and it attracts spirit towards you. So if you want to have interactions with spirit, sometimes opening up your senses a little bit instead of focusing on what the gear is doing attracts the spirit towards you. And then it becomes a matter of feeling what sort of a spirit it is, what sort of an energy it is, whether it feels a good energy, whether it feels a not so good energy, and you can decide whether you want to try to interact with that spirit or whether you want to stop it in its tracks. And yeah, I mean, like for YouTube and stuff like that, they like to see, people out there like to see what's happening with the gear that you've got. You know, they like to see the lights flashing, they like to hear the voices on the S-Box or Necrophonics or whatever other gear you've got. They like to see things happening. But it's also important to put it out there what you're actually feeling, what you're actually sensing. And when you start feeling and sensing things, you start getting little thoughts into your mind. You throw out the questions and you get little thoughts coming back into your mind. Sometimes you actually start to hear a spirit voice talking in your ear. Sometimes you'll hear it very audibly. And all of that comes with giving yourself some time to work with your senses and just trust in your senses. Now, a lot of people might think that it's dangerous inviting spirit that you don't know so close to you. The thing is, you need to trust in what the feeling is, if it feels like a good spirit or a negative spirit or a spirit with a wrong intent. Now, if you feel that it's not quite right, there's two things you can do. One, you can back away, and the other thing that you can do is gold lighting. Now, back when I was around about 18-ish, I think it was, I was already connecting with my spirit guides and that, and I'd already known about the white lighting because everybody was saying, you know, put a shield of white light around you, visualize that, and you'll be protected. Well, my guide stepped forward and said, you need to quit this white lighting stuff, you need to use the gold lighting. And they said, visualize a shield, an eggshell around you of gold light, put your hand up and firmly state, nothing can get through this. This is part of my aura, this is part of my shield, and I don't invite anything negative through this shield. And the more firmly you can do that, you state that very, very firmly, the more protected you are from something that has a negative intent. And they told me that because basically they said to me, listen, you need to do the gold lighting because very soon now you're going to need it, because you're going to be dealing with stuff that other people won't, and you'll be dealing with stuff that is not very nice at all. So from then on, basically everywhere I went, if I went for an investigation or I went to do a house cleansing or sort out issues in people's houses for them or whatever I did, I always did the gold lighting before I went in. I visualized a shield of an eggshell of gold light streaming down above my head. Took a little bit of time to visualize all of this sort of stuff and put my hand up and state firmly, this is my space. Nothing negative, nothing with ill intent is welcome in this space. And the more and more firmly you can do that, and the more that you do that, it becomes so automatic. So I don't even think about doing it these days. If I'm going into an investigation, it's like a light switch, it's just automatically there. So generally, if I'm with a group of people, if there's something that's not got some good morals or some ill intent, I'm not the one that's attacked, because that switch is automatically there and they can't get through to me. It's usually somebody else that ends up getting a scratch or gets pushed or shoved or whatever. Now the thing is, I started doing this gold lighting stuff probably when I was around about 15 to 18-ish, or around about 18-ish I suppose, more or less. And after that, from the age of 18 onwards into my early 20s, I I started running spiritual development classes, and I also jumped into other spiritual development classes, and some of the other spiritual development classes, they were teaching the white lighting, and I said, well, hang on a minute, how about the gold lighting? And they said, what? And I explained it all to them, and I explained that the gold energy itself, the colour gold, is a much more protective and much more healing type of energy. And that's what you kind of need if you're going to do paranormal investigating. And I can tell you, with what my guides threw me into over the years, I'm bloody glad that I've learnt it. So I think it was around about probably 1978, I started teaching people about the gold lighting stuff. A little bit later on, when social media kicked off and everything, I got onto, I think MySpace was the first one, if you remember MySpace. Then I jumped onto the Facebook. Well, all over MySpace and Facebook, because I was involved in the spiritual sites and stuff, you know, and paranormal things. I was constantly teaching about the gold lighting process and all that sort of stuff. And, you know, so, and nobody had really heard about it, the gold lighting. I mean, and I thought people would have realised, you know, especially people who work with different coloured energies for different healing purposes and whatever else, would understand about how beneficial the gold lighting yourself if you're going into the paranormal field is. So chances are that if you hear anything about gold lighting, because I work worldwide on different sites and always have over the years, you've probably heard something about gold lighting from someone, and it's come down the chain probably from me. So it's this, when you go into paranormal investigating, you've got to go in with the right attitude. You can't go in with fear, because like attracts like. If you go in with a fearful sort of an attitude or an expectancy that something bad might happen, or, you know, the likelihood is that you're attracting energies that are going to cause that. But if you go in with a strengthened aura, with the gold light, with the hands up saying, this is my space, nothing is welcome through my space if it's negative. If you do that, you're likely to promote bringing in the positive energies for you to work with, the good positive energies that want to interact with you. And once again, even though you've done all of that, if you go into a cemetery at night time and you feel there's something not right in a certain area, don't go there. It's as simple as that, you know, because your senses are telling you that there's something not right. Trust your senses. Open up your senses more when you're investigating. Trust what you're feeling around you. If you feel something's not right, do your gold lighting, put your hand up, this is my space, you cannot do anything to me, or back away. The other thing that, you know, always do, I mean, I do go into cemeteries on my own at night time. I go to different places on my own at night time, but usually I've cased out the place during the daytime, so I know where the rabbit holes are. I know where I might trip over and break my ankle. But generally at night time, if you're going, it's probably better off if you do go with at least another 1 or 2 people, just to be on the safe side. Because if you do fall down a rabbit hole, or you trip over a grave or a branch or anything that's in a cemetery and hurt yourself, you might have a bit of difficulty trying to get out. So make sure you go at night time with at least another 1 or 2 people. Now, like I said before, my focus is usually behind a camera and with all the tech gear and whatever else. And I find it hard to switch off and to use my senses when I'm focused on the paranormal gear. But you've got to do that from time to time. Sometimes you've just got to leave the tech gear alone, switch the camera off, trust your senses, or keep the camera going, but just wander around and use your senses, even if it means that people are not seeing anything on your videos. It doesn't really matter. Sometimes it's important for people to get a gauge of what you're feeling and what you're sensing. And walking in with the right attitude, the right morals is a very important thing too, because if you go in there with a shit attitude, with a demanding attitude, it's more likely that spirit are just going to stay back and they're going to go, oh, well, we don't really like this guy, we don't really like this person, so we're not going to bother interacting with them. We'll just stand in the background, we'll just keep an eye on them and watch what they're doing. If you go in there with a friendly attitude and a loving type of attitude and with curiosity in your mind, and also remembering that you are protected, you have that gold shield around you, then nothing really negative is going to happen to you. Now, once again, if you feel something's not right, just back away, just walk away from it. Quite often I'll just walk around for K2 in my hand, and I'll, might pick up a few spikes on the K2 and I'll know something's there, and then I'll allow my senses to kick over and go, okay, someone's here. So what's your name? Where you from? Are you buried near where we're standing? Start asking questions and you'll start getting thoughts back in your mind, and that's using your senses. And when you start getting little answers back or little thoughts in your mind, take note of them, because that is all part of developing your abilities. And to be honest, that's how a medium works. It's basically they just open up their mind, they're opening up their senses, and they're saying, well, okay, I can feel you, so you're welcome to step forward and have a chat. What's your name? How old are you? Male, female? Generally, you'll sense whether they're male or female. You just pick that up automatically. So give it a go. Start using your senses a little bit more. And you can have your paranormal gear running, but try to open up your senses just that little bit more, because you'll be amazed at what you can actually pick up on wherever you happen to be, whether it's cemeteries or old jails or asylums or whatever. And yeah, don't forget that spirit are people too. So spirit come with all sorts of attitudes and all sorts of morals, and sometimes they're shy, sometimes they'll stand back. Quite often we'll walk into a new cemetery, and we'll think, oh yeah, this is a pretty cool place, so we'll be wandering around and we get absolutely nothing. We get nothing on the gear whatsoever. We can feel spirit around, but nothing's coming forward. We'll go in a second time, one or two might start coming forward. We'll go in a third time and a fourth time and fifth time, and before too long you've got quite a few spirit coming forward, because they've all been hanging back in the background. They've seen you come quite a few times and have gone, yeah, well, these guys are okay, yeah, all right, we'll talk to them. Because don't forget, spirit of people too, they have choices. They can choose whether they want to speak to you or not. You can't make them, okay? They are people too. There's a lot of YouTube channels we watch, and there's very few that you see talking about what they're sensing and what they're feeling. And I think it's a little bit of a shame too, because there are spiritual type people out there who like to know what people are feeling and what they're sensing. So if you can couple the sensing and feeling stuff with the paranormal gear, and I'm a culprit of that too, because once I get into the field, I like to, I start focusing on the gear, and I'm just focused primarily on the gear, and it's not until I turn the camera off that I'm actually opening up and sensing. Whereas Beth is constantly walking around. She basically might hang on to a K2 every now and then, but she's not really interested in the tech gear. She might use the rods every now and then, or cap balls, and that's all just for show for YouTube. But generally she wanders around and she just walks around using her senses and feeling spirit around, inviting them to come for a chat, going in with the right attitude, going in with that protective attitude as well, that she's not going to get hurt or anything like that. And everywhere she goes, she ends up communicating with some spirit. And this is without the tech gear, and she's generally doing this a lot off the camera. Occasionally I catch her doing it on the camera, but it's mostly off the camera. But just to sum it all up, I think the biggest thing here is what I was saying about the gold light protection. Visualize a gold eggshell around you, put up your hand when you're feeling a little bit uncomfortable in a cemetery. This is my gold light protection. You cannot get through this. My energy is stronger than yours. I have a living energy. Yours is weaker than mine. You cannot come through my shield here. You cannot affect me or harm me in any way. And that is the best form of protection that you can have. You've got to have your mindset on it. You've got to say it firmly, and you have to believe it. Otherwise it won't work. That's the catch to it. There's too many people who go, yeah, I've got my gold shield in, bugger off, and all of a sudden they get a whack in the head, you know, from the spirit. And I've seen that happen because they haven't put the belief into it, they haven't put the intent into it. So belief and intent is an important thing in doing that. So if you can couple that with opening up your senses and feeling a little bit more of what's around you, and feeling if something's not right, and feeling if something is okay, feeling if there's a spirit around that might be a male or a female, trying to sense, ask them their names, see what thoughts you get in your mind. Use your senses like that a little bit, couple that with the paranormal gear, and I wonder how many people would be interested in that. You know, I mean, yeah, people might say, oh, well, that's just what you're telling us. But the whole thing is the rigid paranormal people who are out there doing the paranormal investigating for the right reasons, people will know that. And people will understand this is what you're getting. This is what you're sensing. And here's a little bit of the paranormal gear as well. Have a look at this. Here's a K2 going off. There's a cat ball going off. You know, there's a REM pod going off, or whatever else that you've got there. You know, you couple the whole thing together. And I wonder if people would prefer seeing that a little bit more than, you know, seeing a duality of it all, or mix of it all, rather than just seeing paranormal gear going off all the time and trusting that. I think it's great when I see people, you know, talking about what they're sensing and feeling, because that is part of us, and it's part of us trying to connect to spirit as well. And we all have a little bit of that ability, some of us more than others, but why not test it out? Give it a go, try some sensing as well as the paranormal gear. Alright, cheers for now, bye.